In this week's episode, we have an exciting guest who's a self-proclaimed recovering seller, someone who transitioned from a successful sales career into the world of enablement because, well, they were just better at it. But what makes Jerry's approach unique is a shift from focusing on training and learning outcomes to what really matters: behavior change. We'll dive into how he builds coalitions of the willing and how technology can help determine and measure real change. If you want to learn more about that and some powerful lessons learned, like why you need to stop trying to be right or how to continuously reassess your beliefs, take a listen. Oh, yeah, let us know you're out there. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube, comment, like, repost on LinkedIn. Let's go. Welcome to Coach2Scale, how modern leaders build coaching cultures. I'm your host, Matt Benelli. Join me as we build a community of like-minded professionals who share the belief that effective coaching improves the performance of every team member. Our mission is to help leaders become better coaches. The Coach2Scale podcast is sponsored by Coachum, the world's first AI coaching execution platform that leverages evidence-based coaching to increase quota attainment. And with that, let's get started. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to sit down with today's guest, who's really spent the past bunch of years mastering his craft in sales, but more importantly, sales enablement, which will be the topic of today's conversation. He's worked at extremely successful and relevant companies like Outreach. He's been a go-to-market advisor to numerous companies, especially in the Austin, Texas area. He's the founder and CEO of Sales Excellence Advisors, and he's the head of global commercial operations and excellence at Varicent, a role where he wears many hats, and we'll get into that in a second. But Jerry Pharr, welcome to Coach2Scale.
Matt, so happy to be here. Thank you.
You've been doing this for a while, and you're passionate about many areas that are of extreme importance to our audience. Let's start with a myth buster type question. Jerry, what's a myth about coaching salespeople and sales leaders that you believe is misguided or maybe even complete BS?
Just that all managers want to be coach and they want to be good coaches. And many of them think they are great and maybe they're not, but there are 437 things you could coach on. Like, which things should you focus on? And I think we do a disservice to managers if we're not helping them like define and identify what to coach on and how to do it.
So that kind of makes sense, because when we've gone around the world for the past 11 years, asking sales managers a bunch of questions in our trainings. And one of them is, what activity would you like to do more of? And almost like over 90% say, I'd like to coach more. And then, it kind of goes in different directions from there. And one of the concerns they have is, I'm not coaching as much as I should. And they answer why. And then the answer is, you'd probably guess this one, I don't have time. And I certainly know time is a precious commodity. It is a precious commodity. But generally speaking, if you know what you need to do, it's a lot easier to make time for something than if you're not sure where to go. Hey, I know this is important, but I don't know where to start, so I'm going to go do something else. What are your thoughts there? Why don't managers know where to coach?
Well, I mean, there's a proliferation of technology out there that is providing them insights. I'm using air quotes here, on performance and performance gaps from their reps. So which of these 11 tools do I go to find something that is going to be meaningful and impactful for a rep? And sales leadership and enablement operations leaders generally don't do a great job of consolidating that and surfacing, here are the most important things for you to focus on for rep A versus rep B versus rep C. And that's a failing of not managers, but this ecosystem of support around them.
And when we first met and had our initial conversation that led up to this interview, you shared with me something I thought was really cool and different. You talked about your journey into sales enablement. Can you talk so a two-part question, Jerry. One is, when we talk about sales enablement, can you talk about what you're doing today at Varicent? Because I know there's a lot of hats there. Second part of that is, how did you find your way into sales enablement?
Sure. I'll answer both questions, but I might flip the order of them. And I'll answer, kind of how I transition first. So I was a seller for 6 years, full cycle enterprise seller, a number of companies selling to, big logos like Microsoft and Farmers and Dell and a bunch of others. And I like to think I was good. I was like top 20% good. Um, but I'm very competitive, a lot of salespeople, and annoyed the hell out of me that I was never at the top of the leaderboard. And I was like, well, I tried everything I knew how. I'm pretty good at like sort of hacking away my way to get a little bit better incrementally, but I could never get to the top. And so I sort of made a decision that I want to go to an adjacent profession where I can be the best. And so I kind of did some soul searching, like, what am I really good at? What am I exceptional at? And I found as a seller, I was really good at helping my peers, doing deal strategy, account planning, call preparation, account plan, mutual action plans, all those sorts of things. I was really good at that and helping them. And when I started to have this epiphany around 2014 ish, I started to see a bunch of titles on LinkedIn with this word enablement in them. And first I realized, well, enablement isn't a word. It actually literally wasn't in the dictionary. So that was kind of funny. But
Wow.
you could, like, there's enable and enabler. I think it maybe only recently became an official word. But I said, well, that sounds like something that I'd be good at. So I started, throwing my hat into the ring. And luckily for me, there weren't a whole lot of people doing it. So I got hired even though I had never done it before. I was just a seller prior. So that was late 2014, early 2015, and sort of, did enablement or enablement and operations at a bunch of orgs for 9 years or so, and kind of evolved my thinking on what enablement should be. And I kind of went through the normal progression of the maturity model in enablement. You start off thinking, well, I'm mostly training, so let me measure training stuff. Butts in seats, percent of people who said they liked it, percent of people who passed the quiz. And it's not going to be shocking to anybody listening to this, but most sales leaders didn't really care about those kinds of things. So then you move to the next model, maturity place in enablement is you say, well, I need business metrics then. All right. So I'm going to focus on win rates and revenue and all that sort of thing. And attainment. And so I would do that and say, look how we improved win rate or whatever it is. And then the response is almost always, this sort of smirk or rolling of the eyes because they don't believe you. They don't think that it was you that contributed to all this, thing going up and to the right, that it was their pure genius as a leader. It was they hired new managers. It was they resegmented the org. They did new territory. They did whatever, 37 different things that were the contributing factors to this, not really you guys. So, as an able person, if you focus on those learning outcomes, they generally don't care a lot. If you try to focus exclusively on the business outcomes, they generally don't believe you. And so in my view, the third tier in the maturity model of enablement person is to realize that you really should focus a ton of effort on the middle ground, which I call behavior change. Are reps actually doing things differently? Are they having different kinds of conversations, engaging different kinds of people and that sorts of things? And 10 years ago, that was nearly impossible to do. But today, with so much technology out there, it's usually not too complicated to measure how conversations go, how email threads go, and that kind of thing. So my job is to focus looking at performance how reps are performing and getting better incrementally at those different behaviors. And that was a really long-winded answer, but that's kind of what I do in my current role at Varicent. Although I'm over enablement and a bunch of operational things as well. So, the tech stack, sales process, a lot of sales reporting, that kind of thing, and enablement.
So learning outcomes, right? The butts and seats, the smiley faces on the surveys, passing the quizzes, sales, the CRO don't care.
Mhm.
Business outcomes. Hey, we helped you achieve the, greater deal size, lower average sales cycle length. No, that wasn't you. That was me. That was my leadership genius. That was my team doing it.
Right, right, right.
Thanks anyway, right? They don't believe you. So why do sales leaders I'm assuming the middle ground, focusing on behavior change, getting salespeople to do things differently. that behavior change is more absorbed and believed and valued by the senior sales leadership team. Why is that?
It's a closer attribution. So you're doing an enablement initiative that is focusing explicitly on discovery calls, explicitly on multi-threading, explicitly on whatever sort of that like competency is. Um, and if you do that, and then immediately thereafter, you see these behavior metrics, like the way they actually talk and send emails and things, you see those changing immediately after the initiative. It's not too difficult to believe that it was thanks in large part to this initiative. So it's, that part is easily believable as attributable to you, to your team's efforts. So that part helps. But I know there are people listening who are going to say, well, but if you're not doing business results, you're kind of screwed as an enable person. And I don't disagree. My position is that you have to earn that right to get the attribution on the business outcomes. So that's why my approach is get the little victories initiative by initiative. Hey, hey, Mr. and Mrs. CRO, the last 7 enablement initiatives we did, we saw these charts going up and to the right on, better calls, better multi-threading, whatever it was. Can you and I agree that collectively, thanks to all those, my team has earned the right to take some credit for the improvement in win rates and higher ACV?
And so, Jerry, would you say that if you think about your enablement framework that guides how you work with your sales teams, that's guides it? It's we got to do the learning outcomes, we got to do the business outcomes, but to really get momentum there, we have to get the little wins, and those little wins come in the areas of where we can show more immediate attribution around things like behavior change. Would that be a fair way to describe the framework that you use?
Yeah. And making sure it's those behavior changes are very observable and measurable. Like, you're one of the things you're training on is ending calls by proactively recommending a next step. So you train your gong or your chorus to listen for those kinds of things. Maybe the thing is, you're realizing that they're having lots of people join their calls throughout a sales cycle, but it's usually only one person talking throughout that sales cycle on the buyer side. So you're training them how to proactively engage all the different people on the call based on sort of persona-based prompts. And so you can listen for those, whether reps are doing those kinds of things. So that's what I mean by behavior change, like really tactical, observable behaviors.
So for the business outcome folks who are saying, Jerry, you need to measure that, you can do like doing that with technology, measures it, but it's also useful in coaching the individuals on what they're doing now and where they aspire to be. Would that be fair?
100%. In fact, that's like my model of focusing on behavior change. The dirty secret is my team really can't do it by ourselves. It's literally impossible because like anybody who's tried to get reps to change behavior, you think you're doing one thing, one training is going to make them end calls by asking for a next step. No, it's going to be ongoing, sustained reinforcement and enforcement and praise and leaderboards and all those kinds of things. It's sort of an ecosystem of support. And that is largely dependent on managers. So I need managers to help me coach against those behaviors I'm expecting reps to change.
And we'll get to the manager's role in this in a little bit here. Let's stay on this thread on the technology for a second.
Yeah.
Uh, because the tech stack's proliferated immensely.
Hmm.
Since 2014, I think is when you said you started to focus on enablement. I mean, it's just gone through the roof. For starters, what about the teams? And there are some out there that don't make the investments in all of the latest and greatest technology. Can this work still be done?
Yes and no. It can be done, but not as well. So if you're focusing on behavior change, which I think is essential, how exactly do you measure it if you don't have the technology for it? Basically, the answer is how you would answer that question 15 years ago. You do a ride along, and not a lot of people go in person these days, but you'd like literally join the call as a manager, or an enablement leader and listen and kind of take notes. Or there are some who still do surveys, surveying the manager. How do you think rep is doing on competency A, B, and C? or doing self-reporting from the rep, all those kinds of things. And those are not terrible. I mean, they're better than nothing. But there's always sort of an asterisk when doing the sort of, survey-based reporting.
Okay. And so for now, let's focus on the technologies that are there, and let's assume companies have invested in it or are willing to invest in it. And you don't need to name names specifically if you don't want to. It's not what this is about. But what types of technology are core? Meaning, if you're building a team, if you're when you advise your clients, what are the key types of technologies that they absolutely need that they may not always be thinking of?
For me, it's conversation intelligence. I think only in like the last maybe 12, 18 months has that category of technology really started to live up to the hype. And I've actually I've been a customer of, honestly, I was a customer of Chorus starting in like early 2015. So I've been an early champion and cheerleader for them. But down deep, I kind of knew that it was really just recordings and transcriptions, which wasn't super valuable because, oh, you can go listen, you can coach. Yeah, you could. But how practical is it for you to go, you know, listen to a call and coach on it with every single one of your reps all the time? It's really not feasible. So I think we're finally getting to a place with AI. So almost all these technologies have pretty sophisticated AI these days, that it is surfacing insights for you automatically. And most importantly, it's not on a specific call. I think that's where most people go wrong on using conversation intelligence tools, is focusing on a call. No, it should be on an engagement across a sales cycle, potentially even across an entire account. What sorts of things can you extract from those conversations? And most of them do emails as well. If they track calls, they also track emails. So analyze all the emails, all the calls, and what risks can you identify? And I think that's not too difficult using CI tools.
And so is that a separate CI tool that will go in and?
Well, I mean, all the, Gong does it, Chorus does it. I suspect others do it. If they're not doing it now, I guarantee you their engineering team is feverishly trying to.
And so, okay, so conversational intelligence, any other elements of the tech stack that you think are a must on this topic?
Well, there's also a data element that has nothing to do with like a tool for reps. It's getting data logged properly, because if you're going to measure behavior change, is mostly dependent on measuring behavior that is logged in the CRM somewhere. Sure, it starts in like your calendar and your email, but it potentially even gets logged in your conversation intelligence. But if that activity doesn't end up in Salesforce, you kind of get screwed because you can't run reports on it. And it's, one of the headaches I'm having literally right now is we have a tool stack that will capture 85% of activity from meetings and emails, but it's the ones like, if the person didn't already exist as a record in CRM, it doesn't get captured in that. It's those edge cases that cause a big headache.
Makes sense. So we were talking, circle back to managers. And one of the things that you have on your LinkedIn profile that caught my attention was the importance, that you like to architect and orchestrate sales excellence at scale.
Mm-hmm.
And my belief is, and you may differ here, which is fine. My belief is, in order to do anything at scale with a sales organization, you have to have support from sales management in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that? And then either way, what is the role of sales management when enabling a sales team?
Agree with you 100%. Really sophisticated enabled leaders know that they should be focusing most of their efforts on managers and leaders. You get much more bang for your buck by ensuring that a manager knows how to coach and disseminate information with their reps versus you going and do that with all 7, 8 of their members there. So that's a big part of the scaling thing. And another part of the scaling thing for me is building frameworks. So I focus on measuring things on initiative by initiative basis, whether discovery calls, whatever you're trying to focus on. And so any initiative, I build a framework. Like, here's our guidebook, our toolkit, our process, our framework, our best practice for doing this sort of thing. You follow these steps, follow this sort of thing. And you build that because, you know that there's going to be someone who gets hired next week. There's going to be someone who changes roles, and you don't want to have to go redocument this stuff. You want a documentation on what the expectation is on how to do that thing, and then allow the managers to leverage that documentation on whatever competency you're focusing on.
What would an example be?
Here's how we do discovery calls. So, discovery calls. Here's how you prepare for a discovery call. Here are the different places you can go within our systems. Here's what you should be looking for. When the call starts, here's how to make sure your technology is set up properly and turn your camera on and turn off all your alerts, that kind of thing. And when you're doing your introductions, we recommend doing not a call agenda, but call objectives. Here's what we're going to do at the end. All right. And then once you have to do kind of introductions, first kind of main content piece is to hypothesize a problem. You should have, in your call research, should have learned enough about that person, that company, that you could arrive at the conversation with a point of view and insight, a hypothesis about a problem they probably have and that we can solve. And if you're right, great. If you're wrong, they're going to correct you. So you've got a problem. And then and the next phase is we're probing for impact. We're probing, asking follow-up questions to see if that's a small problem or a big problem. All right. And then you do that 2 or 3 times, problem, impact, problem, impact, problem, impact. Next phase is giving a glimpse of here's how we solve those problems. We'll do a demo later on, but I want to give you some assurance right now that yes, our approach is this, and it's a little bit different from others because of these things. And then that's the sort of giving back to the buyer. And then finally, recommending next step and inviting other people. So those sort of phases of the call, we just put that in documentation, and it's by no means a script, but it is like a mental checklist of I've got to do these things throughout the different phases of a call.
And super important. Like you said, people are joining every day, every week. And how do you scale? Right? You have to have the document, I think is what you're saying. A lot of organizations, Jerry, a lot of people that I work with and I coach will say, I don't want this script, right? This doesn't sound like me. So there we get into the conversation of a framework versus a script, right? The framework is what you just described. The script is here's what you say. What's your take on the difference between frameworks and scripts? Is there a place for both of them? And if so, why? Why not?
So I think educationally scripts work because they require you to memorize and then memorize, internalize, personalize. So that's generally how it happens with scripts. So educationally it works. Emotionally, it's a big challenge because people think they don't want or need scripts. So I try to avoid scripts mainly or almost exclusively because people are going to roll their eyes and they're going to think I'm treating them like children.
Yeah, and it also falls into the not invented here part of the equation. And so, right, and that's important, right? If you're hiring good, talented, ambitious people, they don't want to feel like children. One practice that I've gleaned from others is here's, like you said, for educational purposes, here's a script of what it could sound like. It doesn't mean this is the best one or not. It doesn't mean it's good for you, but let's talk about it. Oh, and then by the way, the action item is take this framework and go put your script together. Not that you use it verbatim on every call, but what could a script sound like? Is that a useful activity?
I think it depends on the culture of the sales org, honestly. And like how mature are the sellers? Do you have, a bunch of 55-year-old sellers who've been selling for 25, 30 years? That's probably going to be less effective in that kind of environment, So yeah, I think it depends.
And when you think about accountability, so where does accountability come into play here?
Well, I am responsible for helping sellers improve, but I can't make them. I don't really have many sticks or carrots I can I can give. So, and it's always it's a little bit of a battle with sales leaders, honestly. They say, "Hey, we want you to, have a number, and we want your variable comp to be based on, I don't know, some sales metric of some sort." Totally get it. And I'm definitely going to do all the best practices I can to ensure that sellers improve incrementally and get better. But ultimately, I can't make them change. Their manager's the one who can make them change. So if you can commit to me, Mr. and Mrs. CRO, that you'll hold those managers accountable for doing stuff and following up on the stuff I'm doing, 100%, I'm game. Sign me up. Without that commitment, it's it's tricky for me.
So how do you get the manager? So let's assume the sales leader is good with that,
Yeah.
you know, where you've seen it work best. How do you shrink the change enough to get the sales leaders to buy in?
Yeah. Well, I begin with a coalition of the willing. I don't fight those battles a lot of like forcing managers to join in and do this because your boss told you to. Um, if you want to participate in hold your managers accountable, great. I love it. I'm going to support you. If not, fine. You go do your thing. I'm not going to make you do it, but I am going to be showing results and impact of how reps are doing who are participating. And I'm going to show those in big meetings in the whole sales org, and your team isn't going to be included in those. So up to you.
What's an example of the managers that buy in? Like, what is it that you're asking them to do in their meetings with their reps?
So my ask is 5 minutes each one-on-one with the rep. And they usually have weekly meetings. So 5 minutes a week with the rep. And what you're doing at the beginning of that, at the meeting, your 5 minutes, you're pulling up a dashboard I've created that is specific to this initiative we're focused on right now. And the initiatives might last 6 weeks ish. And for those 6 weeks, you're pulling up that dashboard that has metrics rep by rep on the specific behaviors we're measuring. Did you articulate a pain hypothesis? Did you uncover the impact, the cost of inaction? Did you proactively ask for a next step for another call? Did you proactively suggest someone else, other persona join the next call? And we're listening for those things in Gong, and I'm creating this dashboard in Gong. I'm asking the manager to pull up that dashboard in Gong during the meeting, share their screen, and say, "Hey, looks like you're doing great. You're at like top the leaderboard on articulating a pain hypothesis during your calls, but you're not really asking for next step. Let's talk about that. What's going on here?"
So I can feel our clients who these are leaders who know what they need done. So all those things that are part of your dashboard, you inviting people to the next call. Did you present a pain hypothesis, right? All those things, they know what needs to be done. They also have a conversational intelligence tool, a Gong or course or something like that, but they don't know where to start with what you just described and build dashboards. And like, what are one or two things that where like a leader who knows what needs to be done, has the tool, but doesn't have an enablement team maybe, or to do it themselves? What can he or she do?
So I think for anytime you think, "Hey, we need to train people on X," the first questions you should be asking yourself are, what are the specific behaviors that we believe are problematic? What are reps doing or not doing that we think is not great? And then the flip side of that, what do we want them to do instead? What are they doing now and we don't want them to do? And what do we want them to do in the future? And how can I measure the difference between those two? And usually it's like something in email, something in calls, something in fields in CRM. Usually one of those sort of three things. And if you can measure it, great. Then there's someone at ops most likely who can create a dashboard for you on those specific behaviors. And by the way, it shouldn't be 12 behaviors. It should be 3-ish, 4-ish, small number of behaviors, very focused for a short period of time, maybe a month or 6 weeks.
And how important is the relationship with the vendor, for example, right? So, let's just say it's Gong or Chorus. Is there a best practices? Do the best implementations leverage people within those organizations? Do they have an account manager that can ride shotgun with sales enablement or with sales leadership to help there? Is that something that you recommend?
So I think I'm a black sheep on this.
Okay.
I actually don't like CSMs from vendors doing training for my reps, mainly because they're going to train on how to use a tool. Here are the 17 features of the tool. And I know, because I know how adults learn, that that is not super helpful. Um, they need to learn in sales motion. I'm trying to achieve this thing. I have an objective I need to achieve. How do I do that? So I like to train workflow based things. You need to prepare for a discovery call. Here's a process for you. Here are the different tools you're going to use in these different ways. Now, sure, Gong is going to be included in there because you can go listen to prior calls, and Zoom Info Copilot is going to be in there because it has some AI things. But I'm training you on specific elements of the tools to achieve a specific objective in your workflow. And no vendor can do that because they don't know workflow.
Very, very good point. Sometimes it pays to be the black sheep, Jerry. It's not all bad. Jerry, in order to have this type of detailed point of view, there have to have been some lessons learned, some scars along the way. What's a painful lesson that you've learned in this business that is worth sharing with the audience so that they might avoid it?
So I got a couple in mind. So I used to work for a guy named Matt Millen. He was the SVP of sales at Outreach for a number of years. He was my boss, super awesome dude. Love him to this day. I consider him a friend and a mentor. And I was just getting to know him in Outreach, and I always had this personality that I'm, fun and gregarious and make people laugh. But I always thought I was the smartest person in the room. Not a very good personality trait to have, but I was the kind of guy I was. One time Matt pulled me aside and he said, "Jerry, stop trying to be right." And I was like, "Oh shit." And, I don't know if I was right or wrong. Maybe I was, but his point was like, it doesn't matter if you're right. You're not going to get these people to do what you need them to do if you're telling them they're wrong and you're right. So that was kind of a big, epiphany for me. And it really kind of helped me think differently about how I approach my work, and that being right matters a lot less than you think it does.
So how did you augment there? Like, do you recall something that you were doing that you stopped doing or you did differently as a result of that good advice?
Practical difference was in my meetings with leaders. I kind of mentally, in my head, I was counting the number of questions I asked versus the number of statements I gave, the ratio of questions to statements. And I always wanted to have a higher percent of questions over statements.
That's a great takeaway there. Questions versus statements, right? Gong measures how much we're talking versus the prospect. Questions versus statements. I wonder, just out of curiosity, is there technology that you know of that does that?
I don't know, actually. Maybe there is one. I imagine it can't be that hard for AI to figure that out, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. I remember from a book, and I'm not a paid endorser of this book, but it was, I think, Never Split the Difference.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Voss, and he said, "There's a big difference between you're right and that's right." Kind of go back to my wife, right? If you ever hear oh yeah, you're right. That's not a good thing, but that's right, right? Yeah, it prompted people to think.
Hmm.
So it seemed like in line with what you were talking about there.
By the way, I have one more. So your last question was the lesson. So the one was, stop trying to be right. The second one is that I guess it's kind of related to that one, but you have to be willing to reassess your strongly held beliefs about sales. Like, you know, I am absolutely confident that people have to know their discovery calls. And I was big proponent of, like, if you don't know you don't have a list of like 20 discovery calls, you're not doing sales. And now I've kind of changed my whole opinion on that. And I just, but the way buyers buy changes all the time. The way sellers sell changes all the time. The way technology facilitates sales changes all the time. So you can't expect something you believe that was the right thing 5 years ago to also automatically be true today.
Jerry, I think that's a super important point, especially when there's a lot of people that look like me and, dare I say, you. We have hair that's a different color, not the color that we started with. Um, and we're leading and coaching and managing people who, let's say, are, they're not, it's not their first rodeo. They've been doing this for a few years now and they've achieved some success, but it's in a different time. And so the importance of people like us making sure that we're reassessing our strongly held beliefs, like that importance can't be understated. But I guess for some of the old dogs out there that may know they need to do that, but haven't as much as they want to, what are a couple of things that maybe either your strongly held beliefs that you've modified or some folks that that have modified their strongly held beliefs? Like, what are some examples?
Yeah. Well, I used to think discovery calls were the key to success. And now I believe that buyers hate being interrogated. And it's better for you to arrive at that call with some hypotheses and test them. Are you, based on what I've seen about your company and what I know about our customers, I'm wondering if you bump up against problem X, Y, and Z. So are you seeing that? And so you're achieving the same objective of trying to uncover a problem, but you're not asking them, what are your challenges or what keeps you up at night? Doing that, testing it as a hypothesis, it demonstrates your subject matter expertise. You gain some credibility, and they can feel powerful if they correct you, which they probably will. So that's one of the differenses. How I've changed my view.
And that's awesome. I have a question on that, but before I go there, is there another one that either you've experienced or you see others?
This is kind of a technology based one. So sequences and cadences. I worked at Outreach for 3 years. So that, kind of ingrained in me. And I used to absolutely believe that those bump emails were effective. Like the ones that they're just automatic reply to that prior email that says, what do you think? Or thoughts? Or did you get this? Any questions? That kind of thing. And a lot of people always said, well, that's just stupid. It's not adding any value. And we always pointed at the data. The data said that those bump emails actually got higher reply rates than other emails. So that I always pointed to that. And I have evolved my thinking. Like now I don't care. It may be true those bump emails still get higher reply rates, but I think they're wrong. I think they're just not respectful of the buyer, the recipient's time. Because you really aren't doing anything to help them. And I try to approach sequences like, helping them think differently about their problems.
That's an interesting point. So what I heard you say there is you had this belief about, bump emails as part of sequences and cadences where people push back, but the data show that it works.
Mm-hmm.
So you double down on it, on the importance of it.
Uh-huh.
But now evolutional thought is it doesn't matter. It's not right. It's not creating the best buying experience or, something like that. And I think that's a whole nother conversation. We probably don't have time to go down there, but if you believe something is wrong, and so don't advocate using that, like using a bump email, even though it produces better results. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an analogy there, but like I tend to agree with you. Forget about the data. I just delete them. I go through my phone and I'll see the first, sentence or two of each email. And if it says, hey, just wanted to bump this up in your inbox, like I just delete it. But I also, before I delete it, I want to call them and yell at them. And I just refrain from doing that.
Another example this is related to prospecting is those double tap phone calls. Because there was a time when these thought leaders would tell you, you call someone, if they don't answer, you hang up and immediately call back the same number. And it was true that you got pretty good pickup rate, but it's because they thought their kid was in trouble at school.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. If I get a call back to back, I am more likely to answer it. But I would say if it's somebody I know, like if my buddy calls, or if my wife calls. If my wife calls and I'm on a call like this, I'm like click, send to voicemail. If she called me right back,
You're absolutely want to get that call. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, I got to grab this. Like something's wrong. But if it's just like number I don't know, I'm less likely to do it. But I'm more likely if they call right back. Like so, but then it'd be like, dude, beat it. Like, hang up.
The numbers might say that it works, but it's wrong.
That's a really good point. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. When the numbers say yes, but it's just wrong. where's the line there? So really good. Um, Jerry, AI, huge topic, obviously, these days. How are the most successful sales and sales enablement teams leveraging AI today? I know we talked about it a little bit, but do you have a a point of view on that?
I think there's like dozens and dozens of use cases that are getting better every day. The one that I find most practical right now is sort of account-based insights. So most people know if you're preparing for a meeting that's coming up, or maybe you're just preparing for a prospecting pursuit into an account. You should learn as much as you possibly can about that account. And there are lots of places you could go, but there are technologies out there right now that give you sort of a one place you can go that is a central repository of all sorts of insights from all sorts of data sources and doing AI summaries of them. It'll tell you the likely pains and problems they might have, some use cases that might be relevant for them, summaries of their 10Ks and those kinds of things. And those things are great because they equip sellers with great kind of talk tracks, things to talk about in calls and emails. But the rep still has to internalize that. They still have to read it and make sense of it and go, okay, well, what am I going to say in the call? And I think that is an important intellectual task a rep has to do. It's not just taking those insights and automatically sending an email on behalf of the rep. I think that's dangerous. But I like the idea of surfacing insights and requiring reps to manually do something with it.
Are you comfortable sharing a name of a vendor that?
The one we're using now is a new product from ZoomInfo called Copilot.
All right. And so it kind of goes back to the evolution of thought you had with regard to discovery calls. And when you said, I don't think discovery calls are as important to the sales process,
Or discovery questions.
discovery questions. And then you went on to say people don't want to be interrogated, which I 100% agree with. What I heard you say is you do better discovery. So using something like Copilot, you can formulate, and doing your homework, you can formulate better questions that don't come across as, what type of CRM are you using?
Totally.
People do you have? How many people are making quota? Right? Like that's an interrogation. But what you're talking about, these are my words, is just doing better, more effective discovery.
Yeah. Yeah. And if earlier I said I was against discovery, I misspoke. I did mean specifically discovery questions. I think discovery is essential, and most deals are lost because of bad discovery. But there are different ways to do discovery, and now I'm more inclined to do like testing hypotheses.
Gotcha. Cool. So you're at Varicent now. For the audience, two things. What does Varicent do? And then what do you like most about working there and the opportunity that presents itself?
The category is sales performance management, SPM. That if you're anything like me, I had no idea what that meant before I started talking to them. So, it is sort of creating territories, assigning accounts to reps in those territories, creating quotas based on those territories, and then again getting reps paid against those quotas and against those territories. That whole process of technologies and systems is called sales performance management. And the company's been around for quite a while. It's like almost 20 years old. First 7 years on its own, then 8 years under IBM, and then came apart from IBM about 5 years ago or so.
Great. And what gets you up in the morning?
Well, I love that, in my role, I get to play with a bunch of toys. I get to fiddle with things. I get to look at insights and see our reps really could probably do a better job of multi-threading. We're really just kind of selling to kind of lower personas. And hey, I know how to solve that problem. And let me go figure out a way to put together an initiative that's going to address that problem. So I can see something, come up with a solution, socialize that solution, people agree with it, and then implement something. And then within not too long period of time, I can have something, in play and seeing charts going up like this into the right for behavior.
And so, Jerry, at this point in the interview, usually what I do is I ask a couple of coaching questions to every guest. With this next question, you may have answered it when you talked about Matt Millen, but maybe not. So I'm going to ask it and you can go wherever you want with it. Can you share an example of someone who's coaching has had an impact on you and how you work today and how you work with the people that you work with?
Well, definitely Matt is up there. Another one is my last boss at a company called Redis. I was there for almost 4 years. And it was actually the first time I had ever worked for an enablement leader higher than me. She was VP of enablement. I was a senior director. And I was reluctant to take the job because of that and not being the true leader. But it was such a remarkable experience. She's an amazing, amazing leader. She just has a lot better emotional intelligence than I do, like reading people and knowing how to help people grow and get the most out of people. So she was the one who would kind of coach me, like, hey, after a call, after a big team call, she'd kind of pull me aside and say, hey, there are a couple members of your team who I could tell they were a little bit frustrated and not feeling like they're adding enough value or getting, doing important things. You might want to, make sure to give them a stretch project or something like. And I was like, shit, you're so right. And she just observed that stuff a lot better than I did.
Ah, that's a good combination between the two of you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then, so the podcast is Coach2Scale. So we talk a lot about coaching. So, really basic question might be, who's your favorite coach? And Jerry, what I'm thinking about there is someone whose name most people would know. It doesn't have to be sports related or, but fictional, non-fictional. Like, who's your favorite coach or coaching character?
Well, in sales world, it's Josh Braun.
Josh,
Um,
educate
and,
me.
and Braun. Former seller, sales leader. Now he's entirely a consultant who posts a lot on LinkedIn, and he does SKOs and training. And his kind of area of focus is mostly around kind of prospecting and the best the sort of language and approach and mentality to use when prospecting in a way that is aware that buyers have their own priorities and challenges going on. And you shouldn't be trying to sell. You should be trying to sort of align with where they are in their kind of buying journey and just being respectful of them. So he has a very thoughtful and respectful approach to prospecting. And I just love it.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that too. And I guess last question, Jerry, is if you had to go on into a SCO, let's say, or any big meeting and talk for 20 to 30 minutes on a topic in your world tomorrow, what would it be and why?
Probably about um, the cost of inaction. I think
Mm.
it's a skill that is sort of a superpower for sellers, and it's rarely done. A lot of sellers will kind of focus on benefits and ROI, and those are important once you're sort of late stage and you're trying to convince their CFO that we're the right people to go with. But if you're still trying to earn the credibility and trying to um, get them to believe that there's a problem worth solving, you got to help them paint a picture for the buyer about, even if you don't go with us, if you just keep doing the same thing you're doing, here's the bad things that happen for you. And telling that story to the buyers in a powerful way and quantifying it is an underappreciated skill. And so I would try to focus on that competency.
And so the idea, the inaction there is not the salesperson not doing something. It's more of the prospect
Yeah,
customer,
I'm sorry, that's correct. The buyer side cost of them not taking action and doing the status quo.
right? Just limping along with, good enough,
Yeah.
or whatever they have today. Actually, I lied a little bit and I said that that was the last question. Yeah, just I just want to go back to one other question that you talked about the coalition of the willing,
Yeah.
right? And in your role, you can't force anybody to do anything. I would say, look, man, sales leaders. If I'm your boss, I could technically kind of force you to do it because I have the power to hire you, right? But generally speaking, as human beings, we don't have the power to force anybody to do anything well.
Mhm.
So that whole notion of establishing that coalition of the willing is really a best practice. Do you find that that coalition of a willing is a voluminous force? I mean, are there a lot of people, generally speaking, if you approach it the right way, that are willing to go along and try to get better?
It's when you first started the company, those numbers are going to be small. It is going to be the early adopters of those kinds of initiatives are the managers and leaders who have sort of a focus on operational rigor. And they'll usually raise their hand saying, yeah, I want to do that. You must
Mhm.
see them get one or two. But as long as you continue to show results with these dashboards, with the behavior change, then the other managers will start coming along. Oh, yeah, I can see that you do get some results. Let me go try that. So you just earn the right to have a broader coalition of the willing.
Awesome. Well, Jerry, we certainly covered a lot of ground. We talked about coalition of the willing. We talked about the cost of inaction. We talked about learning outcomes and business outcomes and why those may not be the best areas of focus, but behavior change is. We talked about architecting and orchestrating sales excellence at scale. So I really appreciate what you brought to the conversation today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And for everybody out there watching and listening, thanks for doing so. Let us know you're out there. Let us know what you liked, and let us know what you'd like to see more of. We want to bring interesting guests to you, provide perspective and nuggets to help what you do every day, to help you do it just a little bit better with a lot less stress. So thank you for listening and watching. And until next time, coach them if you want to keep them. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Coach2Scale, How Modern Leaders Build Coaching Cultures. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at coachem.io. That's COACHEM.io. And follow us on Twitter at CoachemNow. See you all next week. Thanks for joining. And remember, coach them if you want to keep them.